Day nears, a group shifts support from one presidential candidate to another, and a regional party endorses a survey frontrunner. And we've gotten a lot of action on the court today, with supporters of the UAAP men's basketball getting a bit political. Two cyclones hovered over Philippine waters on a week when a number of Filipinos are traveling in and out of the country. Tropical Depression Agaton and Typhoon Malakas. While Malakas entered the country this morning and exited this afternoon, we're seeing how devastating Agaton has been in parts of the Visayas and Mindanao. The death toll from Agaton has climbed to 20, but National Disaster Response officials say these are still for validation. 6 people were injured and 1 is missing. But in Baybay City, Leyte alone, Mayor Carl Cari has confirmed 30 people have died after landslides hit 10 villages. Search and rescue efforts are underway for at least 150 people reportedly missing. Over 100 others were injured and are now in the hospital. Just how bad is the situation in Baybay City? Leyte, our Rex Remigio was finally able to reach the area. He joins us now live. Rex, what is the very latest from there?
Well, the Baybay City government has placed the entire city under a state of calamity after what it described as the massive destruction of houses and infrastructure due to heavy flooding and landslides. Now, just a 7-minute ride away from here, we have seen Agaton's onslaught, particularly the lives lost on that fateful Sunday night.
A harrowing sight in Barangay Banga in Baybay City, Leyte, where houses were buried by a landslide. Many are still believed to be trapped beneath the rubble, and it's still unsure if they're still alive. But for Jessel Mijares, she's certain these 2 bodies retrieved are her niece Josephine and nephew Mark John. Jessel says she spent the night with her mother-in-law in another barangay Sunday evening, only to return to a nightmare the next morning.
Pag gising ko, may pumunta sa amin doon eh. Sabi niya, Giselle, yung ano niyo, bahay niyo, wala na. Tapos napunta ako dito. Wala na, ano na yung bahay.
Her sister and 2 children are still missing, and she can only hope they would still make it.
Mimiss ko yung ano nila, yung tatawagin ko nila. Yung nautusan ko sila. Mimiss ko yun.
Annalisa Martinez, meanwhile, is still looking for her husband and 2 daughters.
Hindi ko talaga tatanggapin ito. Hindi ko makalimutan alaala ang pagmahal nila sa akin. Bilang ina, aking mama yung mga anak ko.
Annalisa says she left her job as a housemaid last Sunday so she and her husband can finally start their sari-sari store business. But when she got home Monday morning, everything was gone.
Nag-chat yung kapitbahay namin, umuwi ka, yung bahay niyo wala na, hindi alam, naka-iwas ba yung anak mo? Nangyari kasama na lang ako para hindi ako masaktan.
Rescue and retrieval operations are still ongoing. It remains uncertain how many people, if not bodies, are still buried in the ground.
The city's government says rescue and retrieval operations will continue for several days and can be suspended if it rains again. Now, aside from Barangay Banga, there are still other barangays where there are reported landslides, such as in Barangay Makinhas, which is more or less 30 minutes away from here. We will try to reach the area as soon as we can. There are still roads that are not passable to all types of vehicles because of landslides. Now, we're also showing you pictures of the extent of damage due to the landslides, including aerial shots of one side of the mountain that sheared off. Residents are still trying to salvage what they can, maybe even find more survivors in all these debris. And the city government is also appealing for more help. They're asking for hygiene kits, clothes, blankets, food packs, and drinking water for evacuees. Back to you, Pia.
Rex Remito there reporting from Baybay City in Leyte. Well, in Cebu province, police say one person was killed in a landslide in San Francisco town in Camotes Islands yesterday. They say the 52-year-old man was quarrying limestone when heavy rains triggered a landslide. He was pulled from the rubble, rushed to the hospital, but was declared dead on arrival. In Capiz, a family from Dumarao town has been rescued after hours of being trapped in their flooded home. In a Facebook post, Diosena May Dayan earlier appealed for help as they have a baby and 3 senior citizens in the family. One of the elderly is using an oxygen tank. Parts of the province are still flooded and local officials are appealing for help. The situation is not looking any better, especially for people in the Visayas and Mindanao. The Weather Bureau Pag-asa says eastern Samar, northern Samar, Biliran, Leyte, southern Leyte, Camotes Island and Dinagat Islands remain under signal number 1. Tropical depression Agaton is seen to downgrade in the next 24 hours, but it will continue to bring moderate to heavy with at times intense rains in these areas. While Bashang or Malakas, the second storm to enter the country this year, has intensified into a typhoon, but it has exited the country just hours after entering the monitoring area this morning. Our long lines are people rushing to take the earliest trips to spend the Holy Week in the provinces. Lois Calderon brings us to one of the busiest terminals in Cubao, Quezon City, where bus tickets are selling slower than usual.
Araneta Center has its mall called Gateway for a good reason. This used to be crowded with people moving in and out via bus terminals here that you see, especially during this time of the year. But that was before the pandemic struck. What used to be 8,000 passengers taking the bus daily during Holy Week, foot traffic shrank to just about a quarter, 2,000 per day. That's the peak expected tomorrow or on Good Friday. Today, buses are half filled. Just about 30 passengers in a bus that can take 66 at full capacity. No long lines. We spoke with the Araneta City property manager and the dispatcher.
With the situation right now, we don't expect so much. So roughly around 2,000 passengers for those dates of this Holy Week. Some of the terminals along EDSA are also operating. So there are routes the same as what we have here. So parang nahati rin ano. And of course, the majority are in PITX.
Sa ngayon po, ang pila namin medyo matagal-tagal kasi matumal pa yung pasahero eh.
This terminal hosts short trips only to Calamba and Batangas in the south and to Arayat, San Fernando, Dau in Pampanga and Tarlac in the north. Buses flying long haul have moved to the integrated bus terminals like the PITX and in Santa Rosa, Laguna. Pia, back to you.
Lois, with fewer passengers, how many round trips do we expect and until what time can people take the buses?
The terminal manager estimates about 80 buses per day pick up passengers here, but bus operators say they'll be lucky to even make a round trip per day, while their permits actually allow them to go back and forth as much as 8 times. That's not the case anymore given the lack of passengers. The earliest bus leaves at 8 a.m. or 5 a.m. in the morning and the last trip goes at 10 p.m. All the others make the last stop as early as 7 p.m. Still, this terminal is useful for those needing bus transfers from north to south or vice versa. Let's listen in.
Galing po kaming Batangas, pauwi na ng Pampanga. Pauwi na uli kami. Medyo mabilis naman yung biyahe.
Hindi naman po ganun kahirap. Nandyan lang naman po yung mga nagbibigay ng ticket. Madali lang naman po.
Passengers say bus fares have increased, but bus operators say they haven't. What's clear is that it's not business as usual in this bus terminal, and bus operators may need to recharge their post-pandemic exit strategy. Back to you.
Senior correspondent Lois Calderon there reporting live from the Araneta Center in Cubao. Now, a different scenario awaits travelers at the country's largest gateway, with authorities expecting more people to fly home for the long weekend. Let's check the situation at the Ninoy Aquino International Airport in Pasay City with our correspondent, Paige Javier. Paige?
Pia, the Holy Week travel rush seems to be dwindling down 2 days before the long break. Earlier, we saw long lines in and outside NAIA Terminal 3. But this afternoon, just before this report, the lines have seemed to dissipated. Apart from packing your luggage, you should also pack some patience, as there will be long waiting time during check-in. Some travelers we spoke to said that they arrived several hours before their scheduled flights.
Kasi akala namin traffic kasi, Tuesday maraming lumalabas.
The Manila International Airport Authority earlier said it is ready for the influx of passengers with tight security and assistance desks. MIAA recorded its peak on Saturday, over 31,000 domestic departures. These numbers are close to pre-pandemic levels and significantly higher than last year when we had tighter restrictions. On Holy Monday, there were less than 30,000 domestic departures and over 9,000 international ones. Airport authorities expect less passengers to arrive tomorrow based on their experience during pre-pandemic times. Pia.
Aside from the long lines, did the passengers encounter other problems?
Well, Pia, authorities have yet to report any problems apart from the canceled flights. This morning, trips from Manila bound to Caticlan, Bacolod, Masbate were canceled due to the bad weather in those destinations. Passengers are reminded to check with their airlines for any announcements such as flight cancellations before heading to the airport. Meanwhile, the travelers we spoke to mostly complained about the long lines. Some say these are unavoidable, while others say they have learned to arrive earlier here to avoid delays. Pia.
Hey, Javier, they're reporting from the NAIA in Pasay City. Well, whether you're doing Visita Iglesia, joining a procession, or traveling, officials remind you to be extra careful because of COVID-19 this Holy Week. The Health Department cautions against a potential spike in cases because of Semana Santa, Ramadan, and election activities. The public should also watch out for common rainy day illnesses like dengue. An outbreak was declared in Zamboanga City on Friday, where over 1,000 cases were reported. 13 children have died from the mosquito-borne disease.
Marami po dun sa mga nagkasakit ng dengue would be less than 18 years old. Hindi naman po lahat ng areas na to ay nagkaroon ng pagtaas ng pagkakamatay because of dengue. Meron lang ho tayong na-monitor na ang pinakamataas, pinakamadami, reported were from Zamboanga City, Lapu-Lapu City, Cebu Province, and Iloilo Province.
The DOH also monitoring the rising number of cases of dengue in Cagayan Valley, Western Visayas, and the Davao region. Well, straight ahead on Newsnight, groups still drawing political battle lines 27 days before the Filipino votes. Volunteers go for Leni Robredo over Isko Moreno, while the top party in Cebu goes for Bongbong Marcos. And CNN Philippines exclusive, the future of Philippine-China relations after the Duterte administration, straight from the Chinese ambassador himself, Wang Xilian. Stay tuned.
San Miguel Corporation. Bisag unsang industriya ang sudlan niini, tinguha sa SMC ang pag-uswag o paglambo sa mga Pilipino. Karon, gikan sa SMC, aniya na ang SMC Davao Cement. SMC Davao Cement. Gama sa Davao para sa Mindanao. SMC Davao Cement. Ato ni Bay. SMC San Miguel Corporation. Bisag unsang industriya ang sudlan niini, tinguha sa SMC ang pag-uswag o paglambo sa mga Pilipino. Karon, gikan sa SMC, aniya na ang SMC Davao Cement. SMC Davao Cement. Gama sa Davao para sa Mindanao. SMC Davao Cement. Ato ni Bay.
Welcome back. More shifts in alliances with just 27 days to go before the Filipino votes. This time, it is a faction of a volunteer group for Manila Mayor Isko Moreno, which is now backing Vice President Leni Robredo. Paolo Barcelon and Anjo Alimario both join us live to tell us more about this. We begin with Paolo. Paolo, one faction of Ikaw Muna Pilipinas now for Robredo, while the other is sticking with Moreno. What happened?
Well, Pia, the answers to those questions depend on both groups, but they are making it clear that their political battle lines have been drawn. The former convener of Ikaw Muna Pilipinas, former MMDA Chairman Tim Orbos, as well as the former Secretary General of IM Pilipinas, Elmer Argaño, have switched their support from Moreno to the candidacy of Vice President Leni Robredo. Their group explains they do not want survey frontrunner Bongbong Marcos to win and that Moreno still has a, quote, bright political future, unquote, even if he gives way for Robredo's candidacy.
We now direct our call, however, for unity directed towards the supporters and volunteers of these candidates. Manalo na po tayo kung hindi ho para sa kanila, sa ating mga kandidato, para po sa atin, para po sa bansa.
However, the rest of IM Pilipinas is disputing this shift in support. The IM Pilipinas group led by Secretary General Philip Picho says they will stick it out with Moreno until the very end. Political officers and volunteers showed up earlier this afternoon saying not all of IM Pilipinas made the switch to Robredo.
We are intact, and originally and until today, 98 to 99% of our members are staying with Yorme Isko Moreno. Ngayon, ginamit nila yung IM. I'm just requesting them, please refrain from doing that kasi you're trying to connote na akala mo yung IM Pilipinas parang lumilipat as a whole.
Now, IM Pilipinas, Pia, was the organization that called for Moreno's candidacy. They claim to have at least 200,000 members and organized on-ground efforts for Moreno's campaign. As for Mayor Isko, who held a motorcade in Muntinlupa City and San Pedro, Laguna earlier today, he respects the decision of the group led by Orbos.
Maraming salamat sa kanila. I wish them all the best. And this separates the men from the boys. I hope the other group will trust them.
Pia, the camp of VP Robredo welcomed this with open arms. In a statement, the spokesperson of the Vice President, Attorney Barry Gutierrez, thanked Orbos' group, saying coming together in shared colors or shared hope, regardless of colors, is what will bring victory for the Filipino people. Pia.
Paolo Barcelon, they're reporting. Let's go now to our senior correspondent, Anjo Alimario, who is with the Robredo campaign. Anjo, Paolo did give a little bit of a clue as to how the VP herself or her campaign thinks about all the supporters of Moreno switching to her. But give us more details.
Well, it's a crucial development that supporters of other presidential candidates are shifting alliances to her. Mrs. Robredo says anything that will boost her numbers is always welcome, and she hopes to meet them in person to personally thank them. Now, early in the day, Robredo visited La Union, a known stronghold of her closest rival, Bongbong Marcos. A pink crowd of 5,000 to 6,000 supporters proved that the so-called Solid North is a myth. In 2016, Robredo lost big in the province with only 19,000 votes against Marcos's 340,000. But she points out, despite her defeat here, she made sure to help the province in times of disasters and even at the height of the pandemic. And if given the opportunity to serve as president, Robredo assures the public that she will be a president for all colors. This afternoon, Robredo brings her campaign to Catanduanes, where she won by over 60,000 votes against Marcos 6 years ago. Now, on Wednesday, she will be barnstorming in Masbate, which she carried in 2016. But the governor is backing Marcos, who is claiming that 17 of 21 mayors there are for the son of the late dictator. Pia.
Anjo, yesterday a malicious video targeting Robredo's eldest daughter, Aika, circulated online. The VP spokesperson said they're considering legal action against those responsible. How is the Robredo family taking this?
Well, the Robredo family refuses to be affected by this issue. Robredo says she's no longer surprised with this move by her opponent, who has a penchant for spreading disinformation about her since 2016. This will only reflect the kind of leadership that her rival will have if elected, full of lies and dirt. And asked if she believes Marcos is behind the black propaganda.
Nakikita naman natin yung mga nakapaligid sa kanya, eto din yung mga ginagamit yung mga influencers. Hanggang ngayon, hindi ako hinintuan over the last 6 years. Pero kung meron man lesson na nakuha ko from that, wala talagang kapalit ang paggawa ng kabutihan, walang kapalit yung katotohanan.
Yesterday, Pia, Bishop Soc Villegas in a Twitter post expressed support for Aika and asked her not to be disturbed by these lies and to stay focused on doing what is good. Back to you.
Yeah, Paolo Barcelon, back to you. The One Cebu, led by the governor of Cebu, Gwen Garcia, formally endorsing Marcos BBM today. But the governor's brother, Deputy Speaker and Congressman Pablo John Garcia, who's running for election, not on board with that. What's going on and why this split in the Garcia family?
Well, Pia, it's because Deputy Speaker PJ Garcia said he is committed to campaigning for Mayor Isko Moreno. In fact, earlier today, Congressman Garcia stepped down as Secretary General of One Cebu, but he said he will continue supporting the local party's bets in the province. Now, Cebu is an important campaign stop for the Moreno campaign team. They've made 6 visits to Cebu province since Moreno filed his certificate of candidacy. And there was even an instance, Pia, that we in the campaign reporters thought that Governor Garcia will endorse Moreno because he was toured in the provincial capital. They even did the sign that is similar to God First, and it's also the sign that's used by One Cebu. But all along, and it's been revealed today that One Cebu will endorse the candidacy of Marcos, but the Deputy Speaker Garcia said he'll stick it out with Moreno until the end. Back to you, Pia.
Thank you to the both of you, Paolo Barcelon and Anjo Alimario, for those updates. So, will we see more alliances shifting ahead of the elections? Join me in Politics as usual at 8 this evening as we make sense of these latest developments. Catch Robredo's running mate Kiko Pangilinan on the show as well. Senator Manny Pacquiao expects to win over Moreno's base after the Manila mayor lost the support of an IM Pilipinas faction to Robredo. Pacquiao claims some of Moreno's supporters will back him instead of the vice president because of his rags to riches story.
Hindi naman siguro lahat papunta doon kay Leni. Baka sa akin pupunta yon. Sa atin din naman siguro dahil si Isko may background din ng galing sa mahirap. Ang mga mahihirap na tao, sulit yan. Sulit na nakasuporta kay Manny Pacquiao dahil wala po silang inasahan. Alam nila yung puso ni Manny Pacquiao na doon ako nanggaling. Doon ako sa buhay na walang-wala.
The latest pulsation survey shows Robredo has 24% support in Class D and 22% in Class E, while Moreno has 8% in both groups. Pacquiao scored 5% for Class D and 13% for Class E. Well, as the Philippines prepares to elect a new president, China says it hopes to maintain close ties with Manila under the next administration. Tristan Nadal spoke with Chinese Ambassador Wang Xilian about this in this exclusive report.
Shaping the course of Philippine-China relations beyond the present administration. This was one of the highlights of the recent telesummit between President Rodrigo Duterte and Chinese President Xi Jinping. In an exclusive interview with CNN Philippines, Chinese Ambassador Wang Xilian said the timing of the meeting was just right.
They have talked about the potential area of cooperation in the future, and President Xi Jinping has emphasized that China maintains the stability and continuity of China's policy towards the Philippines.
From the Build, Build, Build program to the country's pandemic response, China vows to fulfill its commitment to the Philippines in the years to come.
So we have implemented altogether 16 projects so far, and there will be more than 1 dozen to come. PPEs, test kits, and vaccines, whatever we can do, we have tried our best to help. So I think that's kind of cooperation in fighting the pandemic has become another milestone in our bilateral relations.
But on the other hand, you have the South China Sea dispute. So how could the Filipino public better understand the situation in South China Sea?
It is normal to have differences among neighbors. Do not allow the differences to affect or even hijack our bilateral relations.
But as the fate of the Philippine-China relations hangs in the balance ahead of the May 2022 elections, the Chinese ambassador can only hope that the next leader will keep the momentum going.
We also hope that no matter who will be elected as the leader of this country, now, that kind of policy, friendly policy of cooperation will be continued by the next administration. We are willing to work with, that's the next administration.
Tristan Odalo, CNN Philippines.
Coming up, the Mall of Asia Arena in Pasay turns pink as UAAP fans switch their trademark colors for one presidential candidate. And the best performing schools in this year's bar exam. Stay tuned to CNN Philippines. Welcome back. The list is out. 8,241 out of 11,402 examinees passed the recent bar exams. This was the first to be held digitally because of the pandemic. Ateneo had the highest passing rate among schools with over 100 bar takers at 99.6%. And UP had the largest number of excellent takers with 4 scoring higher than 90%. The exam coverage was reduced amid the pandemic and Typhoon Odette's onslaught last December. Politics mixing into sports in the second round of UAAP men's basketball. Some attendees of today's UP versus NU game at the Mall of Asia Arena spotted wearing pink to support presidential candidate Leni Robredo. As for the results, the Fighting Maroons made their 7th straight win, beating the Bulldogs 84-76. Ateneo and LaSalle fans are following suit, also in pink. Yesterday, the school's presidents called on Ateneans and LaSallians for Leni to wear the Presidential Bets campaign color at the 7 p.m. game. The UST also encouraged supporters to make the shift from yellow to pink in UAAP Round 2 matches. The university called this a symbol of their quest for an honest government. Earlier, UST succeeded in breaking its losing streak with a win against UE 72-61. We dig deeper into how politics is entering the hard court with sports writer Naveen Ganglani. Catch our discussion on politics as usual tonight at 8. And that is it for now. Join me again on Politics as usual from 8 to 9 p.m., 1 full hour. I'm Pia Ontiveros for Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines.
RPN, Radio Philippines Network Incorporated, DXKO. 13.68 sa dial sa inyong radyo. RPN DXKO, ang Radyo Ronda, TV sa Dakbayan sa Cagayan de Oro. Sigahan na may galaon sa katawan, andang serbisyo sa kanan. Ang RPN DXKO Radyo Ronda, sakop sa KBP, kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas.
Ani-ana ni ining sibihan inyong masundan, pagtanaw o pagpaminaw ang tumumanon sa Back to Christ Revelation Healing Crusade of Father Lahi. Usa ka oras kini nga programa sa espirituhanong pagtulungan kausa sa matag simana dinhi lamang sa RPN DXKO Teleradyo. Sunda ang mga mensahe ipaabot sa Back to Christ Revelation Healing Crusade of Father Lahi sa matag Domingo alas 5 hangtod alas 6 sa buntag.
Buhay na alaala sa kamatayan ni Yesu Cristo.
Pets are a valuable part of our lives, but sometimes they might get too excited or too aggressive and end up scratching or biting someone. This can put people at risk of developing rabies, a virus that is usually transmitted by the bite of an infected animal. It's increasingly common here in the country today. But the good news is it can be prevented with just a few precautions. On the program today, we'll talk more about the disease, the different animals that can carry it, and what you need to do if bitten by one. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and you're watching MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines. A bite by a rabid animal can be highly fatal, but it's easily preventable. Our guests are here today to tell us how we can best protect ourselves from rabies in a country where it's extremely rampant. With us today is Dr. Jennifer Manzano. She's an adult neurologist from the Asian Hospital and Medical Center. Also with us is Dr. Camille Macalalag Santa Cruz, who is an emergency medicine specialist from the Rizal Medical Center in Pasig City and the Asian Hospital and Medical Center. Now, we have one of the highest prevalence of rabies in the entire world. The Philippines actually records over 200 deaths every year because of it. But outside of Asia and Africa, this disease is considered rare. Dr. Jen, I'll start the discussion with you. Why is it so rampant and widespread here in the Philippines?
We have a lot of animals that are strays. We are an agricultural country, and so we are very exposed to wildlife. After all, rabies is seen in animals and get transmitted to humans. So I think these are the reasons why it is more rampant in the Philippines compared to other parts of the world.
Now, the first step we need to take in order to take control of this rabies situation is better awareness of the disease. Dr. Camille, tell us what exactly is the rabies virus and, of course, especially how is it transmitted? Which animals transmits this?
Rabies virus or rabies is a fatal but preventable disease. It is caused by a virus and may dalawang ways to get infected. Either you are bitten by a rabid animal or you are non-bite naman yung exposure. Like you get scratched or you get an abrasion from exposure or playing with your pet, or you have an open wound that's been licked by an infected animal. So those are the ways by which you get infected. What animals are usually infected by rabies? Usually, they're seen lang sa mammals. Ang mammals, they are warm-blooded animals that have fur. So anything from dogs, cats, domesticated and non-domesticated, like big animals or large animals like cattle, horses. Some pigs have been documented also to get infected. In the wild, pwedeng magkaroon ng rabies ang mga bats.
You said that it can be transmitted through a scratch. Can you define what a scratch is? A lot of our viewers sometimes are very worried na kalmot sila ng pusa or ng aso. Walang dugo, but should they still go and have the rabies vaccine just to be safe?
Pag sinabi pong scratch or kalmot, it is basically caused by a sharp portion of the or a body part of the animal. Pwede kang ma-scratch by yung claws or yung paws ng animal ng alaga mo, yung kuko. Or pwede ring ngipin ang ginamit pero hindi siya bumaon, Ibig sabihin mababaw lang siya. Pero so mga mabababaw na sugat, or scratches or abrasions, pwedeng hindi mag-bleed. Pero we get a lot of patients at the ER pagdating sa amin, Doktora, pinadugo ko na po yan. So, alam mo yun, piniga ng piniga hanggang sa hindi na nga nagdudugo, dumugo pa lalo. So, ibig sabihin, napunit, nagkaroon ng tear dun sa where the scratch should have been, no? So, that actually makes it even worse. So, yan yung isang practice na ayaw sana natin gawin. Minsan may mga alaga tayo maharot. They're very playful, no? And you cannot control them. I mean, it's by nature, no? They use their claws or their paws. And if you get a scratch, agad-agad, no? Wash with running water. Use soap. No? Ang goal mo kasi is somehow ma-minimize yung risk mo of getting the virus. No? And saan ba nakikita yung virus? It is found usually excreted in the saliva of an infected animal. Ang aso, ang pusa, they lick themselves. No? When cats, they groom themselves. They use their tongue and lick their paws, the rest of the fur, etc. No? And for dogs naman, you know how dogs are, they drool and then, no? So yung mga infected na substances or fluids from these animals can actually be, you know, that's where the virus can be found. So if you get that on your skin, on an open wound, then you get infected. You have a risk of getting the virus.
Now, Dr. Jen, what are some of the early warning signs of this disease? Of course, ayaw nating umabot doon, but how long does it take for these symptoms of rabies to start appearing?
The symptoms are usually due to hyperactivity of the nervous system. So, pwedeng nahihirapan silang lumunok. So, there's a lot of, minsan may drooling, nahihirapan mag-drink ng water. Ayaw nila sa tubig. Not because takot sa tubig, but because they have difficulty swallowing water. They may have jitteriness or nanginginig sila. And then they can have behavioral changes. So these are the signs and symptoms of rabies, primarily because the nervous system is affected. Pero initially, the earliest signs, pwedeng mag-manifest siya as like any viral illness. So parang flu lang siya.
Kapag umabot dito sa neurological symptoms, nagagamot pa ba ang rabies kapag umabot dito?
When it has reached the brain, it will have a 100% case fatality rate. This means that mamamatay talaga kapag ang isang tao kapag merong simptomas ng rabies. So talagang kinakailangan, one has to go to the hospital for post-exposure prophylaxis. Ang ibig sabihin, kailangan mabigay yung medicine that can neutralize the virus and be given the vaccination that will actively work against the virus. The recommendation is that the sooner that you get the immunization against rabies, and that means the passive and the active immunization, the better.
Once you have neurological symptoms, if these symptoms appear, there is no effective treatment, unfortunately. This is why preventing these symptoms to reach that point is the best cure. More on this when we return. You're watching MedTalk Health Talk, your partner in healthcare. The number of rabies cases increases every year. It's a virus that affects the nervous system and is very fatal. But preventing the disease is somewhat easy. Today, we'll talk about what you need to do to protect yourself from rabies. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez. Welcome back to MedTalk Health Talk. We've established that people usually contract rabies through a bite of a rabid animal, an animal that is infected with rabies. We can also get it through scratches, abrasions, or even open wounds that were exposed to the animal's saliva. Dr. Jen, what if I was bitten by a rabid animal but there are no wounds? Should I still have myself checked?
From the outset, you don't know if the animal is rabid or not. An animal who is exhibiting behavioral changes most likely is rabid. An animal who is not exhibiting behavioral changes might also still have the virus but hindi pa nasa brain yung virus. So whether rabid or not, you should get yourself checked and you should get the vaccination. It is also recommended to observe the animal for about 10 days if there will be any behavioral changes. So usually, kung walang behavioral change yung animal, when it bites you, Pwede kasing nagre-replicate pa lang yung virus inside the animal and it has not yet reached the brain. Pero nasa saliva na ng animal. So you wait for about 10 days because it takes about 10 days for the virus to reach the animal's brain. So usually by the 10th day, mamamatay sila.
Dr. Camille, another common question is, how about if I was scratched by an animal infected with rabies but it did not break my skin? Walang dugong lumabas.
So if the advice is meron kang exposure, regardless, wala kang nakitang sugat, punta ka pa rin sa ospital. What more kung meron kang scratch, no? These are obvious, breaks in the skin. When you say scratch, may hapde, no? And even if wala tayong makita, no, hindi nag-bleed, no? So it's not that deep enough, but still, because you may be exposed, then it's best to go to the hospital na lang for prevention. For animals kasi, they're not born with rabies. So it's also a disease for them. They either interact with a rabid animal. It doesn't have to be, cat interacting with another cat. It can be being one room with a bat, no, that can be potentially a carrier for rabies. It's best really to be responsible pet owners if you decide to own a cat or a dog, no, to either keep them indoors. If you don't have the luxury naman of keeping them indoors, then make sure that they're not exposed to other animals that, might be exposed also to other animals who are infected with rabies.
Okay.
And ang rabies vaccine for animals are given yearly. Para po siyang flu vaccine natin, no? I think sa Pilipinas, it's around 250 pesos per shot. But sa barangay po, libre po yan, no? Just contact your LGU. They can provide a schedule. If you have a lot of pets at home and you can't possibly bring all the pets to the barangay hall, then maybe you can request for a personnel from the barangay to come and, give your pets a shot.
Now, Dr. Jen, I'd like to go with the next procedure of someone who is bitten at pumunta na sa hospital. What should be done next?
Kailangan mabigyan siya ng post-exposure prophylaxis. And this is there are two kinds, no? One is the immune globulin. The purpose of immune globulin is to provide passive immunization. So it's 4-dose vaccine given over 2 weeks. This will neutralize the virus para hindi siya magre-replicate at hindi dadami yung virus, no? At hindi naaakyat papunta sa nervous system.
Now, Dr. Camille, is the passive and active forms of immunity given at the same time?
So it depends on your exposure category. We categorize yung type ng sugat mo from your exposure para malaman natin kung anong klaseng vaccines ang pwedeng ibigay sa'yo, no? Or yung immediately kailangan mo. So, category 1 is licks on closed skin, no? Na dilaan ka ng alaga mo, ganyan. Usually, pagka ganon, hindi kailangan ng bakuna. We encourage lang, i-wash mo buti, maligo ka, no? Hugasan mo yung parte na nadilaan, ganyan. If, however, dinilaan ka sa muka, and then pumasok yung laway ng pet mo sa bibig mo, then we recommend that you go for a rabies shot. Pag naman sinabing category 2, meron pong break sa skin. Meron kang galos, meron kang scratch, no? Na pwedeng pamasukan ng virus. So pagka ganun po, nire-recommend namin yung rabies vaccine. Pasok sa category 3. Ito po yung talagang nilapakan ng animal, no? Meron kang big laceration from the dog bite. Talagang sugat, nagdudugo. Automatic category 3 po yun. Other wounds or other exposures na category 3, kahit scratch po pero nasa neck and up, ibig sabihin napakalapit sa utak natin, no? Napakabilis ng pwedeng travel ng virus to the brain, then that's considered category 3. Or sa mga areas na highly innervated, ibig sabihin madaming nerves kasi tandaan po natin, ang goal ng virus na rabies ay makarating sa utak, no? So, pwedeng ang channel nila ay yung mga nerves natin. So, pag nakagat ka sa kamay, ayun, highly vascularized yung area na yan, sa kilikili, or yun nga, from neck up, category 3 yan automatically. Any lick, wala kang sugat, pero pumasok yung laway ng aso sa bibig mo, then category 3 yan. So, pagka ganon, kailangan 2 klase ang ibibigay sa'yo. Yung rabies vaccine, which will give you active immune response, and yung H-rig or E-rig, depende kung anong meron dun sa emergency room ninyo, no? Or dun sa Animal Bite Center.
Now, seeking medical attention after being bitten or scratched by a rabid animal can prevent rabies. But there are also several precautions you can take to protect your pets from infection. More on this when we return. Your health is our mission here on MedTalk Health Talk. Rabies is a primary health concern in our country, but together we can work towards eradicating it and keep ourselves and our furry friends safe and happy. Let's discuss how we can do that. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and this is MedTalk Health Talk, your partner in healthcare. There are several things that you can do to protect your pet from rabies. Dr. Jen, can you walk us through some of them? How can our viewers be more protected with their pets?
The important thing in preventing rabies among dogs is to vaccinate them. Dogs who get exposed to other dogs and other wildlife are more prone. So yung mga stray dogs, yung mga aso at pusa na nasa kalye, mas maganda kung ang community merong program talaga para sa vaccination. Nabanggit ni Dr. Camille kanina, marami ng projects naman sa LGU to vaccinate at the barangay level. So please bring not only your pets, but I hope your entire community will also make it a program na kahit yung mga strays sa community will get vaccinated. It's also important to limit the interaction of our pets and of animals with other animals who might also carry the virus. Kasi maraming strains ang virus. So, merong canine strain, merong feline strain, yung strain para sa cats. No? Sometimes, pwedeng mag-cross siya. No? So, pwedeng yung dog ko magkaroon ng, pag na-expose sa cats, pwedeng magkaroon ng rabies virus na galing sa cats. So kahit na may vaccine siya, pwedeng may dinadala din siyang virus. So you have to limit that also. Sana hindi natin palabasin yung mga pets natin nang walang appropriate supervision. So leash your pets when you're walking them.
Dr. Jen, you mentioned na marami palang strains ang rabies. Meron one specific for dogs and cats. Are all of these fatal? And are all of these strains addressed also by the treatments, the vaccines and the immunoglobulin?
Fortunately, they are. Even bats, meron. Nabanggit ni Dr. Camille kanina. And outside the Philippines, I think in the West, yung bats talaga yung primary means of transmitting virus to men. Hindi ka sa dogs. Kasi maganda ang vaccination rate nila among dogs.
Now, Dr. Camille, one of the best ways to prevent rabies is to limit your exposure to this. But unfortunately, a lot of people who are working around animals, dog trainers, or probably pet stores for that matter, or people who are exposed to different animals most of their time, what kind of protection can we give for them?
Kailangan naka-protective equipment din sila like gloves, yung simple protection na ganyan. Goggles, kasi you never know, pag dogs, they start barking, yung spit, can end up in their faces, ganyan. So, of course, mask, just to limit the exposure. So, yun yung mga para sa ating animal health workers, who deal with these animals or potentially rabid. Also, just a note, for people, kasi nauso yung glamping or camping, ganyan. If you see a wild animal that appears to be tame, suspect mo na medyo, kasi they're not supposed to be behaving that way. Usually, animals in the wild, they tend to, shun away from people, especially kung maingay, kung ano. But if you see an animal there na parang it might be sick. So just stay away from strays, stay away from wild animals like that. So just to prevent your exposure.
Dr. Jen, are there any red flags on the behaviors of animal that may prompt someone to maybe think that this animal might be infected with rabies?
The virus attacks the nervous system, so you have to observe the animal very closely. The symptoms or the signs are actually quite similar to the signs and symptoms in men. So, excessive salivation, yung talagang naglalaway sila. Sometimes they have this very, among dogs, no, yung very high-pitched na yell or barking kasi nga their throat muscles can be weak or paralyzed. So the way they bark sounds quite different. Sometimes they tend to be very aggressive because they display behavioral changes. So yung behavioral changes can be something like mukha silang tame when they should be wild, or sometimes they become really aggressive and they become and they attack you without any reason.
Always remember to practice responsible pet ownership to keep your pets and those around you safe and well. Thank you very much, neurologist Dr. Jennifer Manzano and emergency medicine specialist Dr. Camille Macalalag Santa Cruz for being with us today and sharing your knowledge, especially when it comes to rabies. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and thank you for watching MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines. We'll see you again next time.
RPN, Radio Philippines Network Incorporated, DXKO. Presence sa Simbay Utso sa bayan sa inyong radyo. RPN DXKO, ang Radyo Ronda dili sa Dakbayan sa Cagayan de Oro. Sibiyahan na may galaon sa katawhan, andang mo serbisyo sa tanan. Ang RPN DXKO Radyo Ronda sakop sa KBP, kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas.
Sol, naka-HIV?
Ano, Derek?
Nakighilawas ka ba nga walay proteksyon? Nakaagi ka ba og sexually transmitted infection? Nagagamit ka ba og ginadili nga droga?
Hando kay Kuray.
Kung duna kay pagduda o pangutana, bisita sa Alagad Mindanao Facebook page o tawag sa 0930-247-9988. Ang imong pagkatao protektado. Ania kami andam maminaw ug moalagad kanimo. Kini nga mensahe gikan sa Alagad Mindanao ug KBP ug niining estasyon.
Mag-ready na ta, ka 11:30 na, abogado nga amongan nga duha. Dinay sa lunch break, with a tourniquet and job. Dinay sa lunch break, with a tourniquet and job. Dinay sa lunch break, with a tourniquet and job. Relaw negosyo of lifestyle, dinay lang sa lunch break.
Lunch Break with Attorney Ken Tamala and Attorney Jofna Malata. Sabado, 11:30 sa buntag hangtod 12:30 sa hapon sa RPN TV5 ug DXKO Radio.
Pera ng bayan yan, Mayor.
Hindi sa'yo yan. Para sa office suite mo ang sakit yan, Camille.
Hindi sa'yo yan. Para sa anak buhay ni Manang yan, Mark.
Maliit man o malaki, ang korupsyon ay korupsyon. Kapag hinayaan, sisirain nito ang kinabukasan ng bayan. Kaya maglakas loob sumigaw ng, hindi sa'yo yan.
To report about corruption, please contact DOJ Action Center at dojAC@doj.gov.ph.
Ani-ana ni ining sibihan inyong masundan, pagtanaw o pagpaminaw ang tulumanon sa Back to Christ Revelation Healing Crusade of Father Lahi. Usa ka oras kini nga programa sa espirituhanong pagtulunan kausa sa matag simana. Dinhi lamang sa RPN, DXKO Teleradyo. Sunda ang mga mensahe. Ipaabot sa Back to Christ Revelation Healing Crusade of Father Lahi sa matang Domingo alas 5 hangtod alas 6 sa buntag.
Buhay na alaala sa
si Melinda, tindera, kumakayod para sa pamilya. Sa halalan, huwag niyo kong kalimutan.
Arnold ho, bumabiyahe para sa maginawang buhay. Sa halalan, huwag niyo kong kalimutan.
Carla po, nurse, nagsiservisyo sa Pilipino. Sa halalan, huwag niyo kong kalimutan.
Sa boto mo, apektado ang buong bayan. Sa halalan, huwag natin sila kalimutan. Paalala ng Ad Standards Council, Ad Foundation, KBP at ng himpilang ito.
Ang Kwaresma maong panahon alang sa paghatag bili sa atong kasing-kasing. Ang panahon sa pagpangutana may tungod sa atong spiritual nga kahimtang. Atong saligan ang ligong gahom sa kaayo sa Dios. Kitang tanan makasasala, apan ang iyang grasya mo'y makapausab kanato nga makapahimo kanatong bag-o na usab. Ang Kwaresma susama sa usa ka taas nga retreat, diin kini nga panahon mabalikan nato ang atong kaugalingon aron pagpaminaw sa tingog sa Ginoo sa atong kinabuhi, aron nato mabuntog ang temptasyon sa dautan. Hinaot nga niining panahon sa Kwaresma, atong dumduman ang kahulugan nga diha sa atong pag-ampo, mao ang paghigugma sa Ginoo. Ang atong pagpuwasa, mao ang paghigugma nato sa atong kaugalingon, ug ang atong paghatag, mao ang atong paghigugma sa uban. Sa mahal nga mga adlaw o Semana Santa, duyugi ang pagbabati sa RPN DXKO Teleradyo sa Lenten Drama sugod Miyerkules Santo hangtod Biyernes Santo, Abril 13, 14 o 15. Kakang salamat.
Kumusta bisda? Kung ikaw igsuon biktima sa pangdaog-daog, panglupig ug inhustisya, labi na kung ikaw nangita og panginabuhian tungod sa kawadon ug kakabus, nanginahanglan og pagtagad og tabang ug sulbad sa imong mga problema. Ako Bisdak Party List ang mangitag kasulbaran, kahupayan ug paglaom sa inyong giatubang nga mga sitwasyon. Ako Bisdak Party List para sa mga bisdak. Atong dalhon sa Kongreso si kanhi NBI Director Attorney Virgilio Dodong Mendez, ang atong NBI agent sa Kongreso. 113 Ako Bisdak. Kita ni, ato ni.
RPN, Radio Philippines Network Incorporated, DXKO. Proses sa Sinday Utso sa dayan sa inyong radyo. RPN DXKO, ang Radyo Ronda dili sa Dakbayan sa Cagayan de Oro. Sibiyahan na may galaon sa katawhan, andam mo serbisyo sa tanan. Ang RPN DXKO Radyo Ronda, sakop sa KBP, kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas.
Sa ilang lugar sa Capi sa Western Visayas, ang ilang residente sa bayan ng Dumalag kinailangan ng sagipin ng bangka. Humihingi ng tulong ang pamahalaang panlalawigan.
Pumunta tayo dito para sana magdala ng mga tulong natin doon sa ibang evacuation centers natin pero hindi po makapasok. Yung iba, yung malalaking truck, pwede po. Pero may iba talaga dito na hindi talaga passable. Meron yan dito isang lugar na nawasak yung tulay. So 7 barangay ang hindi na-isolate siya. So we're trying to ask assistance sa AFP. Baka po makahiram tayo ng chopper para magpatalaman lang ng ayuda o mga pagkain doon sa mga kababayan natin.
Patuloy na humihina ang bagyong Agaton. Ayon sa Pag-asa, posibleng maging low pressure area na lang ito ngayong araw. Huling namataan ng bagyo sa may Balanginga, Eastern Samar. Narito naman ang mga lugar na nasa signal number 1. Samantalang pumasok na rin sa Philippine Area of Responsibility ang bagyong Basyang. Pero ayon sa pag-asa, wala itong magiging epekto sa bansa at posibleng lumabas din mamayang gabi. Pila sa NAIA 3 ngayong Semana Santa at magbabalita doon ang ating reporter na si Chrissy De Matulak.
Dapat maagang pumunta rito sa NAIA ang mga kababayan nating may mga flight ngayong araw dahil umaga pa lang ay dagsana ang mga pasahero rito. Kailangan din nilang magbaon ng pasensya dahil madaling araw pa lang ay mahaba na ang pila para sa check-in. Kaya naman may mga kababayan tayo na hindi na umabot sa kanilang mga flight pero agad naman silang nakapag-rebook. May ilang canceled flights din ngayong araw dahil sa bagyong Agaton. Kabilang dyan ang mga biyaheng papuntang Katiklan, Masbate, El Nido, Bacolod at Tacloban. Ayon sa Manila International Airport Authority, bago pa magsimana Santa, ay inihanda na nila ang airport para sa inaasahang dami ng pasahero gaya nga ngayon. Ang flights ngayon ay nasa 80% na ng bilang noong pandemya. Marami sa mga nakausap natin ay ngayon lang ulit nakapagbiyahe matapos ang 2 taon dahil sa pandemya. Narito ang kanilang mga pahayag.
Sobrang excited, ma'am. Di kami nakakatulog ng ilang linggo.
Masaya din sila na malungkot kasi siyempre alis ako. Tulad ngayon, no, kapapanganak ng misis ko.
Ayon naman sa ibang mga pasahero, mas mahaba man ang pila ngayon, senyales daw ito na unti-unti nang bumabalik ang lahat sa normal.
Okay naman ma'am, at least maluwag na siya. Hindi na, wala na mga hinihingi na mga requirements o na mga kailangan.
Chrissy De Matulak, CNN Philippines.
Kung pila-pila sa NAIA 3, kabaliktaran naman ang sitwasyon sa Araneta Bus Terminal sa Quezon City. May ulat si Lois Calderon.
Wala pang pila dito sa Araneta Center Bus Terminal sa Quezon City dahil madalang ang pasahero. Ang mga bus dito ay biyaheng Hilaga at Timog Luzon. Kung patungong Timog ay hanggang Turbina lang sa Calamba at sa Batangas. Walang biyaheng Bicol. Kung pa norte naman ang destinasyon ay hanggang Dao, Arayat, San Fernando sa Pampanga. Ang schedule ng unang trip ay alas 5:30 ng umaga at ang huling biyahe alas 7 ng gabi kung patungong Timog. Pero may dumadaan pang ilang bus tulad ng biyaheng Tarlac hanggang alas 10 ng gabi. Ang Araneta Terminal ay animoy connecting terminal sa ilang pasahero. May galing sa Batangas at bababa rito para sumakay patungong norte. Narito ang ilang nakausap nating pasahero at ang dispatcher.
Galing po kaming Lipa, Batangas, pauwi na ng Pampanga. Pauwi na uli kami, medyo mabilis naman yung biyahe.
Hindi naman po ganun kahirap. Nandyan lang naman po yung mga nagbibigay ng ticket. Madali lang naman po.
Sa ngayon po, ang pila namin medyo matagal-tagal kasi tumantay pasahero eh.
Di tulad nung kasagsagan ng pandemya na kailangan ay digital ang payment o via app. Ngayon wala nang booking, walk-in na lamang. Yung isang nakausap natin na pauwing Pampanga, yung dati daw 107 pesos lang, ngayon ay 170 pesos na. Yung mga ibang bus operators ay unti-unti na bumabalik dito. Halimbawa, yung biyaheng Batangas, nito lamang Abril, mula nung ibaba yung COVID alert level. Kasi nung isang taon, on and off ang pagbubukas nitong terminal. At nag-ikot din yung mga tauhan ng LTO kanina para inspeksyonin yung mga busina, signal lights at rehistro. May first aid responders din na nakaabang dito kung sakali mang may aberya o may aksidente.
Yan po ang ulat ni Lois Calderon. Alamin naman natin ang sitwasyon sa Parañaque Integrated Terminal Exchange o PITX. Makakausap natin si Jason Salvador, spokesperson ng pamunuan ng terminal. At pwede rin po kayong sumali sa ating talakayan. I-post ang inyong mga tanong o komento sa ating Facebook Live. Magandang hapon sa iyo, Jason.
Magandang hapon, Ma'am Ruth.
Nakita natin kanina lang yung report sa Araneta Bus Terminal sa Quezon City. Walang masyadong pila kanina. Kamusta ang sitwasyon dyan sa PITX?
Taliwas dun sa nararanasan sa Araneta Bus Terminal, dito sa PITX, medyo abala na po tayo. No? In fact, in the past few days, nakakapagtala tayo ng record number sa mga pasahero. For the past 10 days, we are averaging around 91,000 passengers per day. And yesterday, we were able to tally around 114,000. So medyo mataas na po ito. Today, hindi ganun ka-busy. But as of 2 p.m., nakakapagtala na po tayo ng 53,000 passengers. Naasahan natin na hindi masyadong matao ngayon since it's still a working day. But we do expect people to flock into the terminal tomorrow, Wednesday, kasi that's the end of the week. And then going towards Thursday. So yan po yung pinaghahandaan natin ngayon, Ma'am Ruth.
Nabanggit mo na posibleng ang dumami na by tomorrow, no? Paano ba yung proseso nyo ng ticketing dyan? Nagre-reserve ba sila? May mga walk-in? Para alam na rin ng iba nating mga manonood.
Well, pareho po, no? Nakasanayan na kasi ng mga pasahero natin during the time of the pandemic na nag-online booking po sila. Kasi prior to lowering of the alert levels, nire-require po ng DOTR at ng LTFRB yung advance booking at least 72 hours. So nakasanayan na po nila to, no? Although, since binaba na po yung alert level, ngayon tumatanggap na rin po tayo ng mga walk-in. Pero ina-advise po natin yung mga pasahero natin as much as you can, no, makapag-advance booking po kayo or makapag-inquire po kayo ahead of time para sa ganun matiyak po yung upuan. Kasi kung pupunta po kayo dito while we still entertain walk-ins, baka naman po medyo matagalan ang inyong paghihintay. So para sigurado, mag-advance booking na po tayo.
Ano bang mga probinsya ang sineservisyohan dyan ng bus? At saka would you know kung meron pa kayang slots or baka mamaya naubos na rin yung reservations nila?
Primarily, papuntang south po tayo, Ma'am Ruth, starting from Cavite, Laguna,